so very dynamic and fragile because, as you pointed out, the president right now enjoys his position on the basis of the continued support of the Democratic Alliance and also on the basis of support only of one faction within his political party. There are people within the party who are almost waiting for him to slip up and for there to be an opening, and perhaps they would remove him even before the ANC goes to its elective conference where they choose another leader in 2027. So as he sits in that seat, he has a little bit of vulnerability. But in this particular instance, I mean, the context of all of this is that when the Democratic Alliance took that trip to Washington, D.C., it was following the trip that was taken by AfriForum, which seemed to be a trip that is undercutting, undermining the authority of the South African government and also the authority of the National Assembly. Because if you recall, there were certain laws which were passed, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, the other act being the Expropriation Act, and also the National Health Insurance Act, which members within that community felt that were laws that were going to adversely affect them down the road or even immediately, creating a Zimbabwe type of scenario. And they went to the White House, they went to Washington, D.C. to say these laws need to be reversed in South Africa. And that's something that is properly construed undemocratic and almost treasonous, some would say. And the Democratic Alliance then participated in another trip after the executive order by Trump had been signed, canceling all funding to South Africa, which followed the cancellation of funding from USAID. And when the Democratic Alliance was doing that, Elon Musk himself was on an anti-South Africa campaign. And all of that, I think, put the presidency under a lot of pressure and also made their diplomatic overtures to the Americans a little bit more difficult. So there was definitely a justification from the president to actually say, at some point, if one of my deputy ministers took part in this, I'm going to actually remove that particular person, send a message to my coalition partners that you cannot be in coalition with me while simultaneously undermining my authority and my delegation's capacity to negotiate with Americans on the international stage. You know, this kind of foreign policy is typically and legislatively within the terrain and domain of the executive. And there is a minister of international relations, there's an ambassador, there was an envoy that was appointed. All of those people were supposed to be doing that. So he was justified. The public reaction to the DA's response has been that really it was tepid, it was timid. They oversold the ultimatum and their consequence that they're not going to vote for two particular budget items, as well as withdraw from what President Ramaphosa had announced as a national dialogue, really seems to be weak. He gave them a way out, though, because he had already said that the Democratic Alliance can give him another name from their party and they will be able to get a deputy minister position for that. So it was much ado about nothing at the end, Peter, but something that did occupy the public imagination, the market imagination, because if the GNU were to collapse, that definitely would have an impact on the markets. It would have an impact on the rand. It would have an impact on the bond markets as well. So people were watching all of that, but it was much ado about nothing at the end.
All right, let's go to Uganda. Yoweri Museveni. He must have upset his son when he says that he's going to run for the presidential election. And let me take you back to January 1986. Yoweri Museveni said, the problem of Africa in general and Uganda in particular is not the people, but the leaders who want to overstay in power. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he was right. And he has now become the very thing that he said was the problem in Africa and in Uganda in particular. This announcement that he's going to be running at the age of 80 may indicate that he appreciates that his son is not as popular as him, does not have some of the respect, even though he has been put in that military position, some of the respect that he would need to prevent necessarily a coup or perhaps an armed struggle playing out. And if he thinks that he still should be at the helm and that his son may need more time, that could be one of the reasons why he's particularly doing this. But in principle, really we should, as Africans, point out that there is no democracy in Uganda at the point at which, the opposition leaders get arrested, at the point at which people are getting abused for participating in their political rights. Very disappointing that this is happening, but almost inevitable, knowing the way that these African leaders have been operating. Mugabe stayed into his 90s. So it's going to be a challenge for the next election in Uganda. We will cover it as and when the events unfold, and perhaps there may be enough frustration and enough use of social media and other platforms by the youth of Uganda to push back against this particular grab of power. He has become the problem that he diagnosed in the early 80s, Peter, unfortunately.
And that's where we'll leave it. Jamie, have a great week ahead, and we'll chat next Monday.
You too. Have a great week too, Peter.
Thanks, brother. That's Mighty Jamie making sense of the big stories that played out last week. It's time for your news headlines. Good morning, Onel Nsinsi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Ugandan leader Yoweri Museveni has confirmed that he intends to contest next year's presidential election, potentially extending his rule to nearly half a century. Political parties in South Africa are weighing in on the Democratic Alliance's announcement that it may lay a motion of no confidence in President Cyril Ramaphosa. The DA leader said the party would also not be taking part in the national dialogue announced by Ramaphosa recently. And the Jerusalem District Court has cancelled this week's hearing in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's long-running corruption trial. The court accepted a request the Israeli leader made, citing classified diplomatic and security grounds. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Let's check in with the world of sports as we get our latest update in that world with Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. Now, Zimbabwe's Sean Williams struck a fluent 137 from 164 balls on day 2 of the first test against South Africa in Bulawayo on Sunday, but the visitors were in command with a 216-run lead and nine second innings wicket remaining. So the South African side, missing several regulars, will resume on 49 for the loss of 1 wicket on the third morning after Zimbabwe made 251 runs in reply to the tourist first innings score of 418 for 9 declared. Now, opener, that is Tony Dizosi, is at 22 not out, and all-rounder Vian Mulder has 25 runs as South Africa look to build a formidable total for their hosts to chase. Now, Matthew Brisky was the only wicket to fall in their second innings for South Africa, after he was caught by Wesley Madhevere in a gully off the bowling of Tanaka Chivanga for 1. Now, the 38-year-old Williams held his side's first innings together with a 6th-century in 21 test matches, despite also taking a nasty blow to the helmet from teenager South African speedster Kwena Maphaka. So Maphaka had earlier also ended Brian Bennett's game when he too was struck on the helmet and was also subsequently ruled out for the remainder of that fixture with a concussion. So debutant Seema Cody Yusuf finished with figures of 3 for 42, while stand-in captain Keshav Maharaj took 3 for 70, including the wicket of Williams, who was then stumped by wicket-keeper Carl Verheyen. So day 3 will officially get underway at 10:30 a.m. Central African time this morning. The escalating costs of financial team camps as well as match bonuses were dominant topics at the South African Football Association's Congress over the weekend because the current model is unsustainable. Now, SAFA CEO Lydia Munyabao revealed this fact during a post-Congress press conference at the Sandton Convention Centre on Saturday. In a financial report presented by the Chief Financial Officer, Hroni Kluyo, who showed a $280,000 US deficit budget in 2024, the largest expenditure items were match bonuses to Banyana Banyana, as well as Bafana Bafana players and the technical staff, totaling $8.4 million. Monyapao says match bonuses are draining their coffers.
We do not have sufficient resources that we used to have in terms of taking care of both the senior national teams, because the sponsorship for Bafana Bafana has greatly, significantly reduced, whereas Banyana Banyana, we've beefed up their bonuses. The bonuses that they get now are 4 times what they used to get. However, although we increase the bonuses 4 times, we have not managed to get more funding for the team. So it means that we have to dig deep into our pockets as a federation in order to be able to meet all these obligations. And a national team is not only about bonuses. There's so many other logistics that goes into a national team. If we check...
Also, by the way, the Congress had also heard that Banyana Banyana players were paid each $62,000 for their 2023 FIFA World Cup performances, with Bafana Bafana players receiving $54,000 each for their third place finish at last year's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in the Ivory Coast. Monyapao reveals that a local camp costs up to $280,000.
The costs of having such a camp are huge. We're talking, for a local camp, we're talking about 4.9 million, if not more. For an international camp, it's even more. If your host at least pays for accommodation, it reduces the cost. But there's other costs that you need to also incur because a team has to meet certain obligations when they're overseas, whether they're overseas or not, in terms of fees. So it's the cost of having our teams participating in all these friendly matches. It's a cost that is there that we can't avoid. But I think from our side as a federation, it's about increasing the resources, financial resources.
On to Formula One news now. Lando Norris fought off a challenge from McLaren teammate Oscar Piastri to win the Austrian Grand Prix. Norris' third win of the year, leading home, and McLaren 1-2 reduced his deficit in the championship to the Australian to 15 points heading into the British Grand Prix next weekend. Now, the McLarens utterly dominated the race. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc took the final podium place 17 seconds behind, with teammate Lewis Hamilton fourth, a further 9 points behind. Now, Mercedes' George Russell took fifth, while Red Bull's Max Verstappen was taken out by the other Mercedes driver Kimi Antonelli on the last lap and 61 points of the championship lead. Piastri challenged Britain's Norris hard in the first stint after passing Ferrari's Charles Leclerc, which then had split the McLarens in qualifying. At the first, Norris made mistakes in turns 9 and 10 at the end of lap 10 and also gave Piastri the chance to have a run on into the following lap. And finally, in basketball news, LeBron James is set to play in a record 23rd NBA season. That's after his agent said the 40-year-old has exercised an option to extend his contract with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, Rich Paul said James, the NBA's all-time leading scorer, was targeting a fifth championship after activating a $53 million player option for the 2025-2026 season. Now, James currently shares the NBA season record with 8-time All-Star Vince Carter. His tally of 1,562 regular season appearances is just 50 short of breaking former Boston Celtics star Robert Parrish's NBA's record. So back in 2023, he broke Lakers icon Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's long-standing points record of 38,387 to become the NBA's all-time leading scorer. His current tally stands currently at 42,184 points. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makure.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa in Business. on Channel Africa.
The president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Beda, Dr. Sidi Ould Tah, he is vying for the presidency of the African Development Bank, the AFDB. He positions himself as a fervent defender of economic integration and structural transformation on the African continent.
So I do believe that I have a 360 view of the development challenges in the continent with my experience from both the supply side and the demand side. But more importantly, my vision is to bring on board all the stakeholders and to have a holistic approach for the development of the continent and to develop partnership across the continent and outside the continent, bringing all the stakeholders together to work for one goal is to make Africa green for life and livelihood of the African population.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, it's time to find out what's been happening in the world of business and economics as we say good morning to Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, will lead a delegation to the 4th International Conference on the Financing for Development Summit that is taking place in Seville, Spain, starting today. A statement from the presidency says the event aims to address new and emerging issues in financing for development, including the need to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Shaun Bryce Peace reports.
President Ramaphosa has delegated Lamola as the head of delegation following what he referred to as recent political developments that require close monitoring and management in the country, a reference to current tensions in the Government of National Unity. South Africa's participation at the summit aligns with its G20 presidency objectives of solidarity, equality and sustainability in complementing and supporting the summit's goals of reshaping the global financial system in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. On the margins of the 4th Finance for Development Summit, South Africa will convene a side event under the theme Forging a Common Agenda to Achieve Debt Sustainability in Developing Countries. Shaun Bryce Peace, SABC News, New York.
Still in South Africa, state-owned power utility City Power in Johannesburg says it will not dispatch a team to restore supply in Mayibuye in Midrand until the community agrees to grant safe and unobstructed access. City Power technicians were recently held hostage and threatened while conducting maintenance work in the area. It has been without electricity supply since Saturday evening due to illegal electricity connections that have led to a network overload. City Power spokesperson Isaac Mangena has urged community leaders to engage with them to put an end to the unlawful behavior.
This act of intimidation and violence meted against our teams last week make it impossible for our staff to operate safely in Mayibuye. As a result, we have taken the difficult decision to suspend restoration efforts until the community agrees to grant safe and also unobstructed access to our teams, cooperate with the meter audits that are happening in the area, and allow the normalizations of all tempered meters so that the residents can start buying electricity.
In North Africa, Egypt has begun shutting down some local wheat collection centers ahead of schedule, signaling that the harvest is nearing its end, with purchases falling short of the government's target. The shortfall comes as Egypt, often the world's largest wheat importer, seeks to secure affordable supplies for a vast subsidized bread program that feeds nearly 70 million people amid high inflation and ongoing economic strains. The government had aimed to procure between 4 and 5 million metric tons of wheat from a local harvest, it estimated at around 10 million tons. The season, which started mid-April, officially runs through mid-August. U.S. President Donald Trump says trade talks with Canada will be stopped until such time as they drop certain taxes. He made the remarks in an interview on an American news television. Trump said on Friday he had terminated trade discussions with Canada, citing an incoming Canadian tax on tech companies, including those based in the U.S. In a post on Truth Social, Trump referred to Canada as a very difficult country to trade with and said its levy on tech firms, the first payment of which is due today, is a direct and blatant attack on his country. And Thai Finance Minister Pishai Chunvajira says that he will travel to the U.S. today for trade talks to be held over the next 2 days. He told Thai media that he hopes U.S. tariffs levied on Thailand will not be higher than those imposed on other countries. Thailand faces U.S. tariffs of 36% if it fails to negotiate a reduction before a moratorium expires on the 9th of July. A tariff of 10% has been set for most nations while the moratorium is in place. Earlier this month, Thai Commerce Minister Pishai Tapan said talks between the two countries could lead to good terms on tariffs and possibly settle on a rate as low as 10%. Now let's shift our focus to financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 541, Botswana 13 Pula 29, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 534, Zambia 23 kwacha 65. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 48, Russia 78 rubles 43, India 85 rupee 41, China 71.16, South Africa 17 rand 80 cents. $1 is at 72 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,280, platinum at $1,358 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $67.57 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email, newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
6:46 Central African Time. Let's get into our G20 fact for this Monday, the 30th of June. Did you know that South Africa has proposed the establishment of a Cost of Capital Commission during its G20 presidency? This commission will deliver a comprehensive expert review on the issues impacting the cost of capital for developing economies, which could help address future debt sustainability issues and the related fiscal space challenges. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Now, as democracy in Africa comes under increasing strain with coups, crackdowns and growing public frustration, there's a renewed urgency to ask what kind of leadership does the continent need and what must democracy look like to truly serve its citizens. At a recently held and concluded high-level dialogue on democracy in Africa, policy thinkers, civil society leaders and activists gathered to reflect on exactly that, what it means to reimagine the democracy in today's Africa. Among the voices there was leading the conversations, Dr. Chukwuemeka Eze, who's the director of Democratic Resilience in the Africa program at the Open Society Foundations. He's been outspoken about the need for a new kind of leadership, one rooted in justice, inclusion and accountability. And at a time when youth-led protests are sweeping across countries like Kenya and Senegal, many are asking, are we witnessing a moment of democratic renewal or deeper decline? Well, I spoke to Dr. Eze and I began by asking him about the dialogue that was held in Pretoria that looked at reimagining democracy.
I think first of all is to observe that globally, democracy is going through a lot of challenges. all the gains that we have made over the years are being reversed on just these new forms of illiberalism, dictatorships, and then coupled with the current geopolitics, which is now making the so-called providers of the moral compass that should guide international behavior a challenge. And for us in the global south, it is even more compelling because we have different contexts, we have different kind of development of our democratic ethos, and that now compels us to have the space to talk separately as people of the global south. Now, we had envisaged that this will help us to share our ideas, share our knowledge about common problem, and now begin the process of reimagining democracy. So what this has helped us to do is to shape the kind of engagement, the kind of activities, and the kind of intervention that we need to make if we must sustain democracy in Africa. So you can imagine that that kind of space where we had the opportunity to provide important conversation, especially given the growing concern, like I said earlier on, about the global pushback against rights and democracy. And this actually is in line with Open Society Foundation's commitment to equitable and inclusive governance, human rights, and sustainable development.
Okay, so in thinking about reimagining democracy, what does that look like in Africa? Is it the same as other parts of the world, or is there a democracy that we might reinvent that works for us as a continent?
Beyond the shenanigans that we are seeing, we are also seeing opportunity. Because indeed, democracy as a concept and a governance system is what it is only if it can deliver to its citizens. Our policies are not people-centric, and our politics is not responsive. But beyond all this, we are seeing opportunities. In Kenya, the youths are organizing, and they are not organizing along political ideologies. They are also not organizing along ethnic or primordial sentiments. They are organizing around the issue of economic justice. They are now saying that for you to consider yourself a democratic country, you must choose your leaders, first of all, through fair and competitive elections. You must ensure basic liberties and respect for the rule of law. You must deliver on democracy dividends to the people. And people are no longer saying it's not about what the state can deliver to its citizens. It's about what the citizens feel that genuinely they deserve for the state to provide. So we are renegotiating, as it were, the social contract with the citizens at the center of the kind of politics and the kind of policies they want to see the state deliver to it. So it's no longer business as usual. So beyond the challenges we are facing in terms of pushing back on the gains we have chalked over the years, we are seeing opportunities. We are seeing new actors. We are seeing new ideas. And that is why we are happy to continue to make this investment as far as democracy is concerned in Africa.
So how important is it then for African leaders to look at these protests like the ones we've seen in Kenya, Sudan 2019, and maybe even these coups d'etats in West Africa that seem to be popular and resonate with the citizens as legitimate demands for inclusion, dignity, and accountability, and not as threats?
I don't think that African leaders have much choices to make at this point in time. Those who still live in the past will soon know that they are on the wrong side of realities. In 2020, thousands of young Nigerians took to the streets to protest against police brutality, known as EndSARS. It quickly evolved into a nationwide protest with broader demand for good governance and democratic reforms. Of course, with support even from Nigerians in diaspora. And despite the effort by the security to clamp down on the protests, as well as the fatalities recorded, it gained traction throughout the global community, with support coming from different angles. So people are no longer docile. It is important that African leaders wake up from this slumber and engage in intergenerational dialogue. Engage the citizens in a renegotiation of the social contract. Politics and policies must be people-centered. The current citizen-state trust deficit can only be managed through consistent and sustained dialogue between the state and the citizens. If the state think that through the use of force that they can continue to quieten the people, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and many other countries are now preferring every odd and demanding what they feel and what indeed is their rights.
When we look at countries like Botswana, that changed government, long-time ruling party recently, and many people are looking to Botswana as a flagship in terms of what democracy can do. What have they been doing right? What is it that we can learn from a country like Botswana for the rest of the continent?
Well, there are a lot of lessons. It tells you something. Change is possible. The will of the people, their determination, is not just Botswana. How many years, close to 3 decades of President Yahya Jammeh's regime, it took the citizens the kind of will that they mustered to be able to unseat President Yahya Jammeh. Look at what is going on in Burkina Faso, even though we can't call it democracy. But you can see that when when government is responsive, the citizens are happy. So Botswana is continue to provide the kind of example that other African leaders should learn from. Again, like I keep saying, governance is about the people. We cannot continue to have a few political elites that control the entire resources, our collective resources, just for their own interests, and now making the future of our young people to be bleak. So what this kind of example provide is that when young people commit to mobilize around a political objective, it strongly influences the policies and decisions relevant to address their interests. And
that was Dr. Chukwu Emeka Eze, Director of the Democratic Resilience in Africa program at the Open Societies Foundations.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa.
Listening to the second hour of Rise and Shine, streaming live on www.channelafrica.co.za. Good morning, I'm Peter Ndoro.
And my name is Asanda Beda. Coming up in this hour, we're looking at the signing of a U.S. brokered peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we go to Nigeria as well, where the president there is expected to attend next month's edition of the 17th BRICS Summit in Brazil. Those stories and more coming up as we are together until 9 this morning. If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you.
But we begin this hour with your news as we say good morning to Onele Nsinsi and also Rachel Makura, who bring you the sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. Ugandan leader Yoweri Museveni has confirmed that he intends to contest next year's presidential election, potentially extending his rule to nearly half a century. Museveni announced this in a post on X. The 80-year-old has been ruler of Uganda since 1986, when he seized power after leading a 5-year guerrilla war. The ruling party has changed the constitution twice in the past to allow Museveni to extend his rule, and rights activists have accused him of using security forces to maintain his grip on power. He has, however, denied the accusations. Political parties in South Africa are weighing in on the Democratic Alliance's announcement that it may lay a motion of no confidence in President Cyril Ramaphosa. In a media briefing in Cape Town, DA leader John Steenhuisen said the party would not leave the government of national unity in response to Ramaphosa axing the DA MP Andrew Whitfield as Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. However, the DA leader said the party would not take part in the national dialogue announced by Ramaphosa recently. The DA also urged civil society not to take part, accusing Ramaphosa of protecting corrupt ANC ministers in the cabinet. Fadil Adams of the National Coloured Congress says the DA owes the nation the motion of no confidence.
The NCC is of the opinion that the Democratic Alliance owes this nation that vote of no confidence into the president. It's something they campaigned on, but it's something that they buried. They buried their campaign promise for blue lights and cabinet positions. The DA is never going to call this motion of no confidence. They are in love with the power. They are in love with the opportunity to feast at the taxpayer's expense, and they are never going to forgo blue lights in favor of principle. The NCC urges the Democratic Alliance to at least hold one of its campaign promises and launch this motion of no confidence. Thank you.
Meanwhile, South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula has disputed accusations that the ANC is using the national dialogue to try and retain power. This says the DA says it is considering a motion of no confidence against Ramaphosa. Mbalula says the ANC will not tolerate the DA's threats.
There's no such a thing. National dialogue was proposed by civil society, which we supported. There's no such a thing as using national dialogue to capture the imagination of the people. It is a South African thing. It is led by government working with all other civil society organizations. Hence, we support. There's no ANC that is leading the national dialogue. It's a false, pronunciation that has been made by the DA, of which the reality, this dialogue is about the interest of the people of South Africa.
The anti-migrant group Operation Dudula has accused the South African Human Rights Commission of sidelining citizens' needs over illegal foreigners. Members of Operation Dudula conducted raids on hijacked buildings in Rosettenville, Johannesburg on Saturday. They confronted police over what they claim is inadequate action against illegal occupation. The Human Rights Commission reported the group to the National Police Commissioner, Fanema Semola, and the Hawks ahead of the raids. Operation Dudula President Zandile Dabula has questioned the role of the commission.
These human rights commissions, they need to come clean and come out and tell us who are they. who are they actually supporting and who are they advocating for? Because to us it looks as if they are advocating for foreign nationals. Now I'm saying this because in many incidents we had kids that died of poisonous food. We did not see them. We have kids that are being raped by foreign nationals, but they are nowhere to be seen. But immediately when you touch the issues of foreign nationals, and then they come out, they even have the audacity to take us to court, nobody will stop us because we cannot just sit back and watch our country going down the drain.
And lastly, the Jerusalem District Court has cancelled this week's hearing in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's long-running corruption trial. The court accepted a request the Israel leader made, citing classified diplomatic and security grounds. It is unclear whether social media posts by U.S. President Donald Trump influenced the court's decision. Trump suggested the trial could interfere with Netanyahu's ability to join negotiations with the Palestinian militant group Hamas and Iran. Netanyahu was indicted in 2019 on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust, all of which he has denied. Now, for any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, PSG as well as Bayern Munich win their respective matches and qualify for the quarterfinals of the FIFA Club World Cup. And Zimbabwe's Sean Williams struck a fluent 137 of 164 balls. This on day 2 of the first test against South Africa in Bulawayo on Sunday. Details coming up at 7:30.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is expected to attend next month's edition of the 17th BRICS Summit in Brazil. While en route to Brazil, Tinubu is expected to also visit St. Lucia, North America, as part of his country's commitment to deepening engagements with nations in the Caribbean. Nigeria's presidential spokesperson, Bayo Onanuga, said while in St. Lucia, Tinubu will engage with the Governor-General and Prime Minister and address a joint session of the Senate and House of Assembly. Tinubu has been invited by Brazil's President Luiz Lula da Silva. For more on this, we're joined on the line by President of the Economics Association of Malawi, Dr. Bertha Bangara Chikadza. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. Thank you so much.
Brazil is expected to focus on promoting global governance reform and cooperation among global South countries. Let's talk about the importance of the BRICS summit, what its aim of each summit will be as it rotates across the BRICS countries.
Okay, so the BRICS summit, which is going to be held in Rio de Janeiro from July 6 to 7, is themed on strengthening global South cooperation for more inclusive and sustainable governance. And this is just bringing in some reforms of global governance institutions. Remember that we are talking about the UN, the IMF, and World Bank, and it's like these have a hold on the whole world. However, there have been advocates just to try to reform the IMF and the World Bank. And actually, this is one of the summits that is going to talk about the global governance institutions in terms of these, but also expansion of trade in local currencies, just to reduce the dependence on the US dollar. As you can agree with me that most of the countries, especially even African countries, we are struggling with debt just because debt is denominated in US dollars. And if a trade was carried in local currencies, it would even actually reduce the dependence that comes with the US dollar, but also the collaboration on climate action, especially the AI regulation and public health. So we have seen the damage that climate change is bringing into the world. However, there will be a collaboration of on climate action. How is it going to be done? For example, maybe when we're talking about carbon credits and issues like those, but also maybe the effect of climate change on public health and how it affects countries, because this is also an issue that has been outstanding among countries. So it's something that I think is going to bring together countries, especially those in BRICS, and these are big countries, but also discussions, especially on the financing part when we're talking about the IMF and the World Bank.
In January, Dr. 2025, this year, Nigeria became the 9th partner country of the BRICS bloc of nations, joining Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan. Is Tinubu looking to become a member state?
Tinubu might be looking into becoming a member state because, BRICS comes with its own benefits. Nigeria is a big country in Africa. It also provides a large market, and it will actually provide some force to reckon with in BRICS. Apart from South Africa, Nigeria is huge. We're talking of over 200 million people. And also we are talking about Nigeria, which is actually one of the biggest oil producers. It might also be looking to push new markets for its oil production. And we're also looking at probably issues of financing, as we're talking about. BRICS is also coming in with some financing on its own. So Nigeria might also look into all those opportunities and say, I think if they become part of BRICS, then they will be benefiting more. However, even just becoming a partner country, this new diplomatic status, which was created last year, accords Nigeria a lot of opportunities, including, contributions to some of the decisions that are being made at BRICS. So I think looking into becoming a partner, a member of BRICS, actually is a good thing for Nigeria.
Right. In terms of Nigeria's relationship with nations in the Caribbean, how would you describe this? And is the country positioned best to represent the region in good engagements with North America?
Yes, Nigeria is positioned well. Looking at even in terms of a trade, it's more like the hub connecting Africa or the northern area of the Western Africa to other countries. So we are looking at the huge or a big country in this case. And I think it's a good one that it can represent, for example, the larger part of Africa, but also presenting its economy, which is actually large in terms of production. We're talking of, apart from South Africa in BRICS, Nigeria can be the bigger economy in this. So I think it's positioned well to represent Africa, but also in terms of its connections with Caribbean, it's actually positioned very well because it has almost everything. It's the coast, we can talk about sea routes connecting Africa to the Caribbean and so on. So we can push trade and also everything through Nigeria. So yes, Nigeria is positioned very well to represent us. Thank you.
And what does the BRICS group stand to benefit if Nigeria joins?
If Nigeria joins, so we are talking about, I think, a voice of shaping multilateral economic rules here. If Nigeria can actually contribute to the voice of de-dollarization, can contribute to the voice that is shaping climate finance, but also maybe South cooperation. We are talking about energy diplomacy because Nigeria is big in terms of oil production. And we are not talking just about a small country here. We're talking about a large country in terms of oil production. And I think BRICS is supposed to benefit from here because when we look at OPEC interests, then I think Nigeria is actually better placed in discussing these issues. So we're not talking about reforming global oil markets, promoting $9 trade, because we are talking about the trading in the usual currencies, the normal currencies, or apart from dollars. So I think these will bring benefit to BRICS because they might just be moving away from the dollar, which has always been chaining them for a long time. So adding Nigeria to the voice is actually a plus to BRICS.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has confirmed that he will not be attending the summit due to an outstanding arrest warrant issued against him by the International Criminal Court. Do sanctions against bloc member leaders such as Putin pose a challenge to the business and mandate of the bloc?
I don't think so, because the event remains a symbolic platform for emerging economies to assert influence in multipolar world. So if Putin is not attending, but it doesn't mean that his voice will not be amplified. So it doesn't really cost a lot. And we know it's not just Putin who is keeping. I think there's also President Xi Jinping from China. So the event will still go and their voice will still be represented despite them not attending physically.
Doctor, thanks again for your time, and you do have a great rest of your day. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That was the President of the Economics Association of Malawi, Dr. Bertha Bangara Chikadza.
Hey there, this is Balisa Tau, part of the dynamic duo that gives you
Rising. Wake up with Rise and Shine 6 till 9. Peter and Asanda as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day. At mid-morning, we get on the move with Palace
5. And yes, I'm the other half of the duo, Benjamin Mushatama. And we're going to keep you going with the great conversations.
Turn it up. Okay. On the Move comes back in 2025 to give you more of the content that made us a Maldo and to deliver that bold, boundary-pushing content that you love. And of course, giving you a ride through the 3 hours of news, views, and entertainment.
Every weekday from 9 to midday Central African time, right here on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Cool.
Let's go.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African time. Only on Channel Africa.
All right, let's take a look at this story now. The ANC and the Democratic Alliance are at loggerheads here in South Africa. And it's been playing out in the media significantly. The African National Congress has vowed to reflect on the political implications of the Democratic Alliance's decision to withdraw from the national dialogue following the dismissal of its Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield. The DA, meanwhile, has also called on civil society organizations to reconsider their support for the dialogue. Last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa fired Whitfield for undertaking a U.S. trip without authorization. But DA leader John Steenhuisen says that Ramaphosa's action was unfair, as he failed to act against errant ANC ministers like Nobuhle Nkabane and Thembisi Malan. Ntebo Mkhobo has more.
The strained ANC-DA relations in the government of national unity continue to worsen. In most instances, the two biggest parties in the GNU peg differ on political and ideological postures. But the latest difference was sparked by President Cyril Ramaphosa's firing of the DA Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield, who embarked on an international trip without the authorization of the presidency. And for that, the DA has withdrawn from the GNU Plan National Dialogue and had since given the president an ultimatum to also fire ANC ministers fingered in wrongdoing. Speculation is also rife that the second biggest GNU partner could table a motion of no confidence on the president. But ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Pengumutsiri says this could simply mark the end of the DA participation in the GNU.
I can say with certainty that motion will not pass in the House. And if the DA decides to do that, they're essentially saying that they've walked out of the government of national unity. We know that they've been planning, or a particular group within the DA have been planning the matter of passing a motion of no confidence. We were expecting that was what was going to be spoken about. But we do want to say that should they take that course of action, the ANC very ready to make sure that we defend.
Bengu Mutsiri says the DA conduct will form part of the discussions at their forthcoming National Executive Committee meeting next month, with their National Working Committee meeting coming on Monday also going to be seized with the recent DA posture.
The National Executive executive committee will be convening in mid-July. The National Working Committee will do a thorough reflection of the political and governance implications of what was articulated by the Democratic Alliance today. And that meeting is taking place on Monday. And certainly, I'm sure we will provide a comprehensive response and analysis of what this means for the Government of National Unity, for the work we're doing in Parliament, and for our strive to ensure that there's a cohesion in society by getting these parties to work together in line with the adopted statement of intent.
With fears that the recent spat between the two architects of the post-1994 Government of National Unity could signal the end of the road for this marriage, DA leader John Steenhuisen says they are still committed to the pact.
We will stay in the GNU as long as we believe we can be part of that change. However, we should not be tested to the point where we will have to make a decision. And that is why I've said we voted for the GNU and we voted for Mr. Ramaphosa because his public pronouncements were that he was committed to cleaning up government, to ensuring that those who are responsible for state capture are brought to justice and held accountable. But the more he protects and the more that those who are guilty of new and fresh transgressions remain unpunished or untouched, he becomes increasingly less distinguishable from that other faction. And that may well tip the scales in the future.
While the political bickering continues, the DA has also vowed to vote against all the budgets of ministers that it deems corrupt, something that the ANC says is a common cause in Parliament that MPs could vote for against anything they don't go along with. I am Tebu Mokobo in Johannesburg.
All right, let's continue with this story now, and we're going to talk to somebody who's quite high up in the echelons of the Democratic Alliance to discuss their decision to pull out of the national dialogue and the broader implications of President Cyril Ramaphosa's dismissal of Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield. We now have on the line Helen Zille, who's the Federal Council Chairperson of the Democratic Alliance. The DA has described the president's move as politically selective and an attack on coalition governance. We also get her views on what this means for the future of multi-party cooperation and accountability in government. Helen, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Good to be with you.
So we watched the presser, and let's start with Andrew Whitfield. Did he err by going on this trip without express permission, even if the president hadn't given him a response?
Well, we can only work on the handbook, and the handbook says ministers and deputy ministers should, not must, should apply to the president if they are going on official business abroad. Now, Whitfield was not going on official business abroad. This was a private trip paid for by the DA because we have a lot of contacts built up in Washington, and we wanted to try and dissuade them from withdrawing South Africa from AGOA. So the DA supports AGOA. The DA supports trade. The DA doesn't want big barriers to trade like 30% tariffs and things like that. So we were going to put the DA policy and to say the DA feels very strongly about this. If you do these things, you will not only be punishing the ANC, you'll be punishing all the people of South Africa, creating a lot of unemployment. But it was a DA trip. It was not an official government trip. And Andrew never once purported to be speaking on behalf of the South African government. So even though he didn't have to, and even though it wasn't an official trip, and even though the handbook says may and not must, should and not must, he did nevertheless write to the president. And he wrote 10 days before he left. And his office followed up every day telephonically for a reply. And there was just silence. And to this day, he has not got a reply. So to be fired for the president's failure to reply to a letter is a bit much.
It's a private business, a private trip. However, it is a national issue, and the people on the other side are not going to take off his deputy minister hat and say this is a DA person. they're going to see him as a senior government official and will hear him as a senior government official, surely.
The point is, it was a DA delegation. We'd set it up through the DA lobbyist in Washington. Everybody knew it was a DA delegation, not a South African government delegation. And if that was to be the case, then the president must answer his letters.
Right. So you've described Andrew Whitfield's dismissal as politically motivated. Why do you say that?
Well, the whole thing is to give us a stick in the eye. That's what they want to do. They want to keep on humiliating us and to show who's boss. And we act in good faith. They never, ever stick by any of the agreements they undertake. I mean, that statement of intent, which we negotiated so intensely before the first sitting of Parliament of this administration on the 14th of June last year, going through all of that process and getting the signatures on the bottom of it was just a farce. Because, in fact, they've just ignored that statement of intent from the very beginning.
Does this signal a breakdown of trust between the Democratic Alliance and the government, the ANC in particular, especially in the context of the GNU?
Well, I don't trust the ANC. I can't speak for John, but I don't trust them. Because when they say they're going to do something, and even when they put their signature on a document that says they're going to do something, they simply ignore it as if it doesn't exist.
Are you not using this, as some may be accusing you of trying to distance yourself from the GNU?
No, we're trying to say apply the rules of the GNU properly. Don't invent rules. Don't fire people for what aren't infringements, but that you develop and embellish as infringements when you ignore real and serious infringements in your own ministers. That's what we say.
So, why have you pulled out of the national dialogue?
Because it's an important thing for Cyril Ramaphosa. He's very keen to recreate the 1995 Kliptown feeling where the Freedom Charter was produced and this feel-good moment. And we're saying, we're not bit actors in your play for feel-good moments. The feel-good moments must come because we reached an agreement, because we are applying that agreement, because we're getting rid of corruption in government, and because we're working together to do so. Not because you act exactly the way you like, fire people for no reason, and leave the corrupt people in government.
Apart from responding to Mr. Whitfield, what sanction do you think would have been appropriate?
He could have called Whitfield in and said, I should have answered your letter. I'm very sorry. I didn't answer your letter because maybe my office is in such a chaotic state, which is probably the reason. The ANC is so chaotic, they never answer any letters or do anything or arrive at any meeting on time, if they arrive at all. So he should have said, I'm sorry, but I think you should have given me more time, even though your office tried to phone me every single day. It was a mistake that I didn't return your call, but even if I don't return either calls or letters, please know that even though the handbook says you don't have to, I would like you to. It was such a minor transgression. That's all he needed to have done.
Do you think the GNU can hold? We seem to be getting more and more of these kinds of incidents and pressures between particularly you and the DA.
It's been like this from the beginning. They've been in bad faith since the beginning. They've been manipulative. They've been undermining since the beginning.
So the GNU, can it hold?
We'll see. I mean, you've got to understand that if the GNU does not hold, the South African rand will fall through the floor. Investments will be lost. Jobs will be lost at a very, very high rate. People will get even poorer and less employed. Food costs will be higher. The rand will be worth less. People's pensions will be worth less. The results will be catastrophic. The DA stands between South Africa and catastrophe. And we believe that the ANC should treat us as if it understands that fact.
You've threatened that a vote of no confidence against President Ramaphosa may happen. We're hearing other voices saying that you wouldn't dare because you're so used to power now, blue lights and jobs, and that one of your campaign promises was actually to call on the president if he let us down. Is this a serious threat that you might call a vote of no confidence against the president?
Yes, of course it is. But you see, the issue's got to be right. I mean, firing a deputy minister is a wrong thing to do, and there must be consequences, especially if the deputy minister did nothing wrong, and Ramaphosa's own colleagues did plenty blatantly wrong things. And so we must respond to that, but is it worth the kind of consequences that I sketched out a moment ago? That's what we've got to get right. We've got to get the balance right between cause and effect. The response has got to be commensurate to what is done.
Helen Zille, we're going to have to leave it there for the time being, but thank you very, very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
That's the Federal Council chairperson of the Democratic Alliance Party in South Africa, Helen Zille, explaining what's behind their position regarding this standoff or tense moment between the Democratic Alliance and the ANC, in particular with the president of the ANC and also head of state, Cyril Ramaphosa, firing one of his deputy ministers who happens to be a party member of the Democratic Alliance. It's 7:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. At least 7 people are reported to have been killed and many others wounded during anti-government protests in the Togolese capital Lome over the weekend. Political parties in South Africa are weighing in on the Democratic Alliance's announcement that it may lay a motion of no confidence in President Cyril Ramaphosa. And Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's 12-day conflict with Iran has improved the chances of freeing hostages still being held in Gaza. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports in this hour. Here is Musubudi Makura with Sports News.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. Paris Saint-Germain coach Luis Enrique said defeating Lionel Messi as well as Inter Miami on Sunday was trickier than it seemed despite the French side's 4-0 Club World Cup last 16 triumph. Now, Jean Neves' early strike sent PSG ahead and then they scored 3 more times in the flurry before half-time to take an unassailable lead. Now, former PSG as well as Barcelona star Messi impressed in the second half as Miami battled well but could not find a way through. The Spanish coach said his PSG team, who won the Champions League title this season, the Ligue 1 as well as the French Cup to claim their first ever treble, was in spectacular form and are hoping to triumph in the USA. Meanwhile, Harry Kane scored twice as Bayern Munich overcame a determined resistance from Flamengo to book their place in the FIFA Club World Cup quarterfinals with an entertaining 4-2 victory on Sunday. Vincent Kompany's side will now play Paris Saint-Germain in the quarterfinal this coming Saturday for a place in the last 4. Flamengo were backed by a huge and a passionate crowd following at the Hard Rock Stadium and bow out of this year's tournament despite a performance of real determination. On to this now. The escalating costs of national team camps as well as match bonuses were dominant topics at the South African Football Association Congress over the weekend because of the current model is unassailable. Now, SAFA CEO Lydia Munyabao revealed this fact during a post-conference press conference at the Sandton Convention Centre. In a financial report presented by the Chief Financial Officer, Khoni Kluyo, who showed a $280,000 deficit in 2024, 2024. The largest expenditure item was match bonuses to Banyana Banyana, as well as Bafana Bafana players and the technical staff, totaling $8.4 million. Munya Bao says match bonuses are draining their coffers.
We do not have sufficient resources that we used to have in terms of taking care of both the senior national teams, because the sponsorship for Bafana Bafana has greatly, significantly reduced, whereas Banyana we've beefed up their bonuses. The bonuses that they get now are 4 times what they used to get. However, although we increase the bonuses 4 times, we have not managed to get more funding for the team. So it means that we have to dig deep into our pockets as a federation in order to be able to meet all these obligations. And a national team is not only about bonuses. There's so many other logistics that goes into a national team. If we check.
Now, the Congress also heard that Banyana players were each paid $62,000 for their 2023 FIFA World Cup performances, while Bafana received $54,000 each for their third place finish at last year's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in the Ivory Coast. Monyabao reveals that the local camp also costs up to $280,000.
The cost of having such a camp are huge. We're talking, for a local camp, we're talking about 4.9 million, if not more. For an international camp, it's even more. If your host at least pays for accommodation, it reduces the cost. But there's other costs that you need to also incur because a team has to meet certain obligations when they're overseas, whether they're overseas or not, in terms of fees. So it's the cost of having our teams participating in all these international friendly matches. It's a cost that is there that we can't avoid. But I think from our side as a federation, it's about increasing the resources, financial resources.
On to some cricket news now. Zimbabwe's Sean Williams struck a fluent 137 of 164 balls on day 2 of the first test against South Africa in Bulawayo on Sunday, but the visitors were in commanding position with a 216-run lead and 9 second innings wickets remaining. South African side, missing several regulars, will resume on 49 for 1 on the third morning after Zimbabwe made 251 in reply to the tourist first innings score of 408 for 9 declared. Opener Tony Dizorzi is 22 not out, and all-rounder Vian Mulder on 25 as South Africa now look to build a formidable total for the host to chase. Matthew Biskey was also the only wicket to fall in the second innings. Meanwhile, the 38-year-old Williams held his side's first innings together with a 6th century in 21 test matches, despite also taking a nasty blow to the helmet from teenage South African speedster Kwena Mapaka. Mapaka also had earlier ended opener Barnett's game when he also struck him on the helmet and subsequently also ruled out of the remainder of the fixture with a concussion. Debutant Seema Cody Yusuf finished with figures of 3 for 42, while stand-in captain Keshav Maharaj took 3 for 70, including the wicket of Williams, who was stumped by wicketkeeper Carl Verheyen. Day 3 starts at 10:30 a.m. Central African Time this morning. And finally, in some Formula One news, Lando Norris fought off the challenge of McLaren's teammate Oscar Piastri to win the Austrian Grand Prix yesterday. Norris' third win of the year, leading home a McLaren 1-2, reduced his deficit in the championship to the Australian to 15 points heading into the British Grand Prix this coming weekend. The McLarens utterly dominated the race. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc took the final podium place 17 seconds behind, with teammate Lewis Hamilton fourth and a further 9 seconds behind. So Mercedes' George Russell took 5th position, while Red Bull's Max Verstappen was taken out by another Mercedes driver, Kimi Antonelli, on the first lap and is 61 points off the championship lead. Well, that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Africa.
Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África.
Okay.
Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
It's time now for your business news. Good morning, Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, will lead a delegation to the 4th International Conference on the Financing for Development Summit that is taking place in Seville, Spain, starting today. A statement from the presidency says the event aims to address new and emerging issues in financing for development, including the need to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
President Ramaphosa has delegated Lamola as the head of delegation following what he referred to as recent political developments that require close monitoring and management in the country, a reference to current tensions in the government of national unity. South Africa's participation at the summit aligns with its G20 presidency objectives of solidarity, equality and sustainability in complementing and supporting the summit's goals of reshaping the global financial system in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. On the margins of the 4th Finance for Development Summit, South Africa will convene a side event under the theme Forging a Common Agenda to Achieve Debt Sustainability in Developing Countries. Shervin Briceby's SABC News, New York.
Still in South Africa, state-owned power utility City Power in Johannesburg says it will not dispatch a team to restore supply in Mayibuye in Midrand until the community agrees to grant safe and unobstructed access. City Power technicians were recently held hostage and threatened while conducting maintenance work in the area. It has been without electricity supply since Saturday evening due to illegal electricity connections that have led to a network overload. City Power spokesperson Isaac Mangena has urged community leaders to engage with them to put an end to the unlawful behavior.
These acts of intimidation and violence meted against our teams last week make it impossible for our staff to operate safely in Mayibuye. As a result, we have taken the difficult decision to suspend restoration efforts until the community agrees to grant safe and also unobstructed access to our teams, cooperate with the meter audits that are happening in the area, and allow the normalizations of all tempered meters so that the residents can start buying electricity.
Egypt has begun shutting down some local wheat collection centers ahead of schedule, signaling that the harvest is nearing its end with purchases falling short of the government's target. The shortfall comes as Egypt, often the world's largest wheat importer, seeks to secure affordable supplies for a vast subsidized bread program that feeds nearly 70 million people amid high inflation and ongoing economic strains. The government had aimed to procure between 4 and 5 million metric tons of wheat from a local harvest, it estimated at around 10 million tons. The season, which started mid-April, officially runs through mid-August. U.S. President Donald Trump says trade talks with Canada will be stopped until such time as they drop certain taxes. He made the remarks in an interview on an American news television. Trump said on Friday he had terminated trade discussions with Canada, citing an incoming Canadian tax on tech companies, including those based in the U.S. In a post on Truth Social, Trump referred to Canada as a very difficult country to trade with and said its levy on tech firms, the first payment of which is due today, is a direct and blatant attack on his country. Thai Finance Minister Pishai Chuhavajira says that he will travel to the U.S. today for trade talks to be held over the next 2 days. He told Thai media that he hopes U.S. tariffs levied on Thailand will not be higher than those imposed on other countries. Thailand faces U.S. tariffs of 36% if it fails to negotiate a reduction before a moratorium expires on the 9th of July. A tariff of 10% has been set for most nations while the moratorium is in place. Earlier this month, Thai Commerce Minister Pishai Naritapan said talks between the two countries could lead to good terms on tariffs and possibly settle on a rate as low as 10%. Your financial indicators this morning: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 541, Botswana 13 pula 29, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 534, Zambia 23 kwacha 65. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 48, Russia 78 rubles 43, India 85 rupee 41, China 71.16, South Africa $1 is at 17 rand 80 cents. $1 is 72 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,278, platinum at $1,362 per ounce. The price for Brent crude oil at $67.65 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email, newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
7:45 Central African time it is. The signing of a U.S. brokered peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda has been met with mixed reactions among Congolese citizens, with some expressing support for the deal, while others are opposed to it. The agreement was signed in the U.S. capital of Washington, D.C. on Friday. Chris Ochamringa reports.
The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, presided over the signing of the peace agreement by the Congolese Foreign Minister, Therese Kaikwamba Wagner, and her Rwandan counterpart, Olivier Ndungungirihe. It calls on both countries to cease hostilities, stop supporting armed groups, and respect each other's territorial integrity. The deal also includes the creation of a framework for economic cooperation in the mining and tourism sectors for the DRC and Rwanda. The DRC has long accused Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels in order to plunder its minerals. But Rwandan authorities have denied the charge and accused the DRC of backing a militia of ethnic Hutus who seek to destabilize their country. For some Congolese, the deal has raised hopes of ending the M23 conflict that has left thousands of people dead and displaced millions of others since late 2021. But others are pessimistic, arguing that the deal focuses more on the geopolitical, security, and economic interests of Rwanda and the U.S. as opposed to the protection of Congolese civilians. The U.S. government is set to sign a separate deal with the DRC that will grant American firms access to the DRC's strategic minerals. Previous efforts to end the long-running war in the DRC have failed. Many are hoping the U.S. brokered deal will bring about lasting peace. Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Kinshasa.
Well, to unpack the significance of this particular peace agreement signed between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda in Washington, D.C., and what it could mean for the region's long-term long-standing conflict. We're now joined by Dr. Charles Nyokonge, who's an Africa analyst and conflict resolution expert with years of experience studying the Great Lakes region. We'll also explore the reported plans by the US to enter into a separate mineral agreement with the DRC and what all of that reveals about the geopolitical interests at play. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having me, and good morning to your listeners.
Okay, let's begin with your general assessment. Is this peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda a meaningful step forward, or is it more diplomatic theatre?
I believe that this is a meaningful step forward in the sense for two reasons. The first is that peace is good irrespective of who brokers it and irrespective of the time that it comes. Number two, the DRC as well as Rwanda, they have been talking across each other, and this peace agreement is comprehensive enough to cater for the needs of the DRC as well as those for Rwanda. And thirdly, the fact that the peace agreement itself has put a framework for its implementation or a monitoring tool to ensure that it is implemented is one of the things which have not been so far explored.
Is there anything significantly different about this initiative? Because we've seen so many in the past that have failed to take hold, and some saying that it's difficult to understand how something brokered in Washington, D.C. might have effect in Africa. What's different about this round, do you think?
The first thing which is difficult about this round is that the DRC has finally acknowledged that the Rwanda's concerns about FDLR in the presence or in Eastern Congo is a threat to the stability of Rwanda, and that justifies to some extent why Rwanda has maintained some meaningful presence in Eastern Congo. To the extent that it is so, this peace agreement has made room for both countries, including with their partners, to work towards the complete demobilization or removal of the threat that FDLR poses as a precondition for Rwanda to actually quit the DRC. This framework has created a timeline of 3 months, dangerously so, because if in 3 months FDLR is not removed, then Rwanda's presence will remain justified.
All right, so how is it that M23 are the proponents against the DRC's National Army, and yet they are not a signatory to this? Are we saying that the M23 is going to listen to Kigali and just lay down its arms?
And that's exactly one of the things, the missing pieces in this peace agreement. That while this peace agreement is celebrated, it's a political agreement which has missed a core part of it, which is actually engaging the military, the armed and the non-state armed groups. To the extent that it is so, these are going to continually feel like they are disenfranchised and that their issues have not been brought to the table, and they'll continue to pose as threats to this peace agreement. So I'm hoping that the framework for implementation is going to look into these and perhaps find means and ways to make sure that the threats that these cause and what actually fuels them can actually be suffocated once and for all.
Washington's ability to broker a deal here, and then we're hearing about mineral deals. Is the DRC selling itself for something?
The peace agreement which has been signed has nothing to it as far as minerals are concerned. I think that there's a possible second leg to this, whereby the United States would have access to the minerals. Perhaps that would be a measure in which the peace agreement is going to be enforced, and that's why I said at the beginning that peace is good irrespective of who brokers it or how it comes about. Now it's for the DRC to make sure that when they go into those rounds of negotiations or engagements, that they have the best people on the table and that their minerals are secured to the benefit of the Congolese people. Until then, it is premature to actually judge that the DRC has sold out its country or its minerals. After all, as they are right now, that's the source of a lot of illicit movement of Africa's wealth, and that is not accounted for. So if this can provide the DRC a platform for accounting for its minerals that leave the country and for making some revenue out of it, then I think it is a positive step forward.
If that's the case, then help me understand why the DRC and Rwanda have not listened to the African Union and other regional bodies that have tried to broker peace. Why only listen to Washington?
Well, because Washington, on the one hand, has comes with a carrot and a stick. So that's what the African Union has not come with. The African Union doesn't have a clear implementation mechanism. The Washington brought to bear a clear implementation mechanism. Washington has a great relationship with both Rwanda and with the DRC. And to the extent that these two warring parties had also gotten exhausted of fighting and the counter accusations of one another, had created a situation where they were not able to listen to each other when the African Union tried to broker the peace. But the African Union did try, and we need to acknowledge that the fact that the African Union actually reached out, including amongst others, to M23, is one of the steps which is going to help to secure this peace agreement and to make this peace agreement sustainable.
How much do we know about this agreement? I mean, what happens now? Does the M23 withdraw to somewhere? Because the original issue was their integration into the National Army of the DRC.
And that's what we hope that the implementation arm of this peace agreement is going to look into, and that the consultations which are going to happen with both the DRC and both Rwanda will perhaps look into those issues, including ensuring, as the parties have agreed, that they are going to stop supporting different armed groups. That if Rwanda stops supporting M23 and the DRC stops supporting FDLR, that somewhere they are going to suffocate the existence of these groups, and that perhaps FDLR or M23 will come to the table and form and get some kind of amnesty, which will lead to their reintegration to the respective armies that they so seek to join.
Who's going to ensure compliance of this agreement and future steps that are agreed?
The compliance of this peace agreement is going to be overseen by the United States, and it's going to put into place a team that constitutes both Rwandese, the Congolese, and some people dignitaries from the African continent.
And again, they'll only listen because of the carrots that are dangled.
Well, it's not just the carrots. In any peace agreement, the sustainability is hinged on a complexity of a number of factors. One is the willingness of the parties to actually go to the table, to listen to one another. That's something which has been missing all along. The DRC has gone to the table together with Rwanda, and they've exchanged words, they've exchanged, there's not been any consensus of the mind. That's what they have actually gained here. So it's not necessarily the carrot. Two is the fatigue of fighting and the counter accusations, which has gotten to the point where the DRC is accusing Rwanda, the United Nations now accusing Rwanda. So Rwanda gets to a point where anything possible to sanitize its image is important. So yes, there's the aspect that the United States brings the possible threat, but which threat can only go as far as the parties have actually allowed themselves to sit around the negotiation table. Because no, Rwanda could refuse that they are not going to Washington. But Rwanda did go to Washington. Rwanda did sign this agreement, satisfied that the FDLR component, which they have constantly said FDLR poses a threat to its security, and that FDLR is supported by the DRC, that no one has listened to it. For once, Washington listened to it, and it is in the peace agreement that both parties are going to work towards the elimination of the threat that the FDLR poses, and this is going to lead to Rwanda's unconditional withdrawal.
All right, and very briefly, because we're running out of time, where does this leave the African Union and SADC and other regional bodies, particularly the EAC, that have tried to intervene? Do they just step back and watch this process carry on with the US leading it?
As long as this is going to bring peace, then that's what is going to happen. Where the African Union is needed, they are going to intervene. The African Union has done significant work ahead of this process, and I think that the meeting at the White House actually acknowledged the fact that that has been done. The president of Angola is going to be invited at the next rounds when Kagame and Tshisekedi meet in Washington, and all of these are going to be acknowledged as steps which have led to the successful signing of this peace agreement. So the African Union has done work or building blocks towards this peace agreement. It just needed the finishing, and the United States has done that.
All right, and one final question. Everyone's talking about DRC and Rwanda as the main protagonists here, but other countries in the region have been involved there or thereabouts, and the M23 are not the only rebels in the east. How are all these other players going to be dealt with beyond M23, DRC and Rwanda?
Hopefully, when the implementation mechanism is put in place, it's going to look at all of these things, because implementation will be both a technical team and a political team that will constantly bring issues that threaten the peace agreement to the respective actors, including to the convener of the peace agreement, and these issues will be dealt with piecemeal by piecemeal.
Dr. Nyokonge, we're going to have to leave it there. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed. Your insights greatly appreciated on the program.
Thank you, Peter. Have a good day.
Thank you very much indeed. So that's Dr. Charles Nyokonge, Africa analyst and conflict resolution expert, sharing his thoughts on this US brokered peace deal between DRC and Rwanda. I don't know what to make of this, Asanda, but we'll have to wait and see if it holds. But peace, whoever brings it, I suppose, deserves recognition.
Absolutely. As your guest was saying there, peace, whenever it comes and however it comes, is always welcomed. We'll have to see that story as it continues to unfold. In this next hour, the final hour of Africa Rise and Shine, we go to Togo, where at least 7 people were killed and many others wounded during anti-government protests in the capital, Lomé.
Right now, though, it's time for your news, and that'll be followed by sports headlines with Onele Nsitsi and Rachel Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. At least 7 people are reported to have been killed and many others wounded during anti-government protests in the Togolese capital Lomé over the weekend. Campaigning groups and rights organizations have denounced abuses committed by members of the Togolese security forces and militias, and said 7 bodies had been recovered from rivers in the capital. They also reported dozens of wounded and more than 60 arrested during the 3 days of demonstrations. Protests are rare in Togo, where President Faure Gnassingbé has maintained his grip on power since 2005, succeeding his father, who ruled for nearly 4 decades. Ugandan leader Yoweri Museveni has confirmed that he intends to contest next year's presidential election, potentially extending his rule to nearly half a century. Museveni announced this in a post on X. The 80-year-old has been ruler of Uganda since 1986, when he seized power after leading a 5-year guerrilla war. The ruling party has changed the constitution twice in the past to allow Museveni to extend his rule. The rights activists have accused him of using security forces to maintain his grip on power. He has, however, denied the accusations. Political parties in South Africa are weighing in on the Democratic Alliance's announcement that it may lay a motion of no confidence in President Cyril Ramaphosa. In a media briefing in Cape Town, DA leader John Steenhuisen said the party would not leave the government of national unity in response to Ramaphosa's axing of the DA MP Andrew Whitfield as Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. However, the DA leader said the party would not take part in the national dialogue announced by Ramaphosa recently. The DA also urged civil society not to take part, accusing Ramaphosa of protecting corrupt ANC ministers in his cabinet. Fadil Adams of the National Coloured Congress said the DA owes the nation a motion of no confidence.
The NCC is of the opinion that the Democratic Alliance owes this nation that vote of no confidence into the president. It's something they campaigned on, but it's something that they buried. They buried their campaign promise for blue lights and cabinet positions. The DA is never going to call this motion of no confidence. They are in love with the power. They are in love with the with the opportunity to feast at the taxpayers' expense, and they are never going to forgo blue lights in favor of principle. The NCC urges the Democratic Alliance to at least hold one of its campaign promises and launch this motion of no confidence. Thank you.
Meanwhile, South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula has disputed accusations that the ANC is using the national dialogue to try and retain power. This says the DA says it is considering a motion of no confidence against Ramaphosa. Mbalula says the ANC will not tolerate the DA's threats.
There's no such a thing. National dialogue was proposed by civil society, which we supported. There's no such a thing as using national dialogue to capture the imagination of the people. It is a South African thing. It is led by government working with all other civil society organizations. Hence, we support. There's no ANC that is leading the national dialogue. It's a false, pronunciation that has been made by the DA, of which the reality, this dialogue is about the interest of the people of South Africa.
Lastly, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's 12-day conflict with Iran has improved the chances of freeing hostages still being held in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister was speaking to members of the Domestic Intelligence Agency. Netanyahu is due to testify this week in a high-profile criminal case. He is facing charges of political corruption, including bribery and fraud. The Prime Minister's attempts to again delay the High Court hearing on account of his busy schedule and the special state of emergency over the Iran war were rejected at the end of last week. The BBC's Wyatt Davis.
The Israeli military has warned it will escalate operations with extreme force to destroy Hamas's remaining capabilities. But in what could be interpreted as an indication of some flexibility, Benjamin Netanyahu today said that after victory over Iran, many opportunities had opened up, first of all to rescue the hostages and defeat Hamas. That emphasis on hostages first was welcomed by their families as a sign that perhaps the Prime Minister might be prepared to strike a deal to end the war.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News. I'm Onele Zinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, teams are getting ready for the 2024 WAFCON tournament. Today officially marks 5 days to go to the start of that tournament in Morocco, while South African golfer Aldrich Potgieter wins his first ever PGA title. Details coming up at 8:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
At least 7 people were killed and many others wounded during an anti-government protest in the Togolese capital Lomé this weekend. Demonstrators in Togo continue to demand the resignation of President Faure Gnassingbé, whose family has ruled the West African nation since 1967. The unrest, which began on Thursday, was sparked by Gnassingbé's recent appointment to the powerful role of President of the Council of Ministers, which has no fixed term limit. Dozens of protesters have been arrested. We're joined by political analyst and researcher Kwezi Mngabisa. Kwezi, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Asanda. Thank you for having me. I'm well. I trust all has been well. Just finding your broadcast.
Yes, we're well as well. Thank you so much for making time. These protests in Togo are in calls for the president, Faure Gnassingbé, to resign. He made recent changes in the constitution. What are they, if we can start there?
Well, this is a very serious case of constitutional gerrymandering. Whenever dictators feel that they are losing hold on power or seek to extend their tenure, the first place that they go to is the constitution, because it is in the constitution that the responsibilities of the institutions of state outlined, stipulated, and people can hold those institutions to account. So what Nasibe has done is that he has actually changed the political system of Togo from being a presidential system to being a parliamentary system. But there is a catch here. It's not a magnanimity for the concern of popular participation of the people, but he actually has created now an institutional vacuum whereby there will be a council of ministers, which he will be president, and here is the catch. That president of the council of ministers has no term limits, which means that although he has been in power since 2005, there is no telling when he will actually ever step out or anybody else to actually challenge him. The position of president has merely been made as ceremonial, which basically is what is icking a lot of people in civil society and, of course, in opposition politics. Because what this actually means is that with a parliamentary system, the constitution will be subjugated now to whatever the parliament and, of course, the executive headed by Nasibe to his dictates.
So as far as power is concerned on this position of President of the Council of Ministers, it speaks to the term that's not been definitely stated. He can stay in the position for as long as he wants. But how powerful is this role in other ways?
It is very powerful because one of the things that many of us, I won't say we missed it, but we did not interrogate enough and early enough, was actually the fact that the elections that were actually organized in the country were actually being organized in very legally spurious conditions, in that they were actually being done under a new constitution, although they were being organized under a new constitution, although the preparatory work was actually done under an old constitution. So he was playing fast and loose with the constitution for quite a while, with the intention of coming up with this surprise role as the apex of his footwork, as it were. The reality of the matter is that at this point in time, it is anybody's guess what the Council of Ministers is going to abrogate for itself the powers that have been vested in the Constitution. It is up to this very same Council of Ministers, headed by himself, that will actually come up with the determination of the political course of that country. So all of the governance, constitutional, legal guarantees that we are all comfortable with and that the Togolese had come to be accustomed, or at least hold their government accountable on, those standards are actually up in the air at this point in time, which is what is making these particular protests very feverish, because people are understanding that if they let this go, there is no telling when they may ever appear out of the abyss that they've been thrown into.
From a protest action, 10 people have been arrested as at figures given on Friday. Do we know if this number has increased?
Well, typical of dictatorial tendencies, there is not much accounting to the public or to any institution. So even those figures of 10 people having been arrested, if we read reports for the last couple of days, there have been hundreds of people that have been arrested. I think that the 10 we are talking about were arrested in the 3 days just of these particular days of protest, which is the 26th to the 28th. But the reality of the matter is that the fact that we cannot even speculate in an informed way about the numbers of people arrested, those injured, and we keep saying in our reporting at least 7 are dead, it is primarily because we are dealing with a situation whereby there is a commitment to a blackout of accountability, a blackout of news, a blackout of actually confirming the state of affairs and security and stability of the country on the side of the government. And I think that this is what is making these particular protests a bit problematic, because you may recall, Asanda, that protests have been under scrutiny in that country since 2022, when there was a massive riot and loss of life. And they've been, in all intents and purposes, in terms of legal definition, been banned. I don't think that the Togolese at this point in time are comfortable in letting go of the only form of dissent and communicating their disagreement with things, with where things are going at this point.
As you say, this is not the first protest that we are talking of, this latest one over the weekend. Early this month, there were protests as well. What do we know about the call by some civic or civil society groups in the country of Togo for the release of about 100 political prisoners? Other figures saying it's 80 political prisoners.
This, I think, ties in with my earlier point that there's been a lot going on in that country. It has almost fallen below our radar and the media's radar as well. There are a lot of people that have been arrested previously because when a country does not have a culture of, how shall I put it, freedom of protest or freedom of expression, arrests or detentions, they are missed by national attention as well as continental, if not international attention. So what we know is that there are people that have been arrested, and of course, because the charges will be spurious and the institutions themselves have been compromised, we do not know when they will appear in court, what they will be charged with. Nobody is quite comfortable commenting authoritatively on the criminal code that is actually in use right now that would bar or that would actually be used to charge those that have been arrested. So this calls, I think, at this point in time for serious regional engagement with the situation in Togo. And I would imagine that after this weekend's protest, the Economic Community of West African States would actually want to assert itself and its role, because what happens in Togo, though a small, relatively small country geographically and in terms of numbers, but it does have it could be a blot on the reputation of West Africa in trying to deal with a variety of issues. Young people are at the forefront of this thing. And if you let that particular protest situation get out of hand, we would not imagine the type of inspiration it would give for other young people in some of the West African countries who wish to follow suit.
It's 8:15 Central African Time. We are in conversation with political analyst and researcher Kwezi Mngcebisa, talking about the Togolese capital Lome this weekend having seen protest action from majority young people in the country who want even the president there of Togo, Faure Nasibe, to resign. As you mentioned, Kwezi, earlier, the protests were banned in Togo since 2022. So can the arrests of these political prisoners or protesters be defended?
Well, at this point in time, the government, I won't say has been lenient, but I think that I don't think it's a question at this point in time of what the government's response is, but I think the motivation on the part of the protesters. I think that a lot of people across the political political divide, as well as civil society, feel that they've actually allowed a lot to go wrong in Togo because they've been silenced or they have not been as vigilant as they should have been. At this point in time, I don't think that we are looking at a situation where you have got to apply in order to go and protest. People are just simply going to the streets to protest. And Asanda, there's a particular factor that is actually driving this. It's not only the political, constitutional, and government-related issues that are actually driving this particular bout of protests at this point in time, but it is actually the cost of living, the purchasing power for the Togolese has really messed up in terms of the prices of electricity, the broader cost of living at large. So what we are seeing is not just simply a coherent political strategy expressing itself, as they would say in French, a popular manifestation. It's not a popular manifestation with politics only. It's social, it's political, it's governance, and more than anything else, it's economic.
And on those calls for President Nasibe to restore purchasing power to the people of Togo, what measures are being suggested in terms of how he goes about doing that, and is there will?
That's very interesting, Asanda, because you've touched on the crux of the matter. Many of us across the continent and around the world, when we see protest movements emerge or protest action take place, we like to imagine that there's a political end state there's an alternative political reality that is being pursued. That political reality has got programs, it has got policy positions, the rest of it. In this particular situation, it's just people being fed up. I mean, if you look into even the people that have been calling and leading this protest, one of them, a popular young person who's a music rapper or what have you, he makes the call, people heed the call, they go protest, he gets arrested, he comes out very apologetic to the president and everything else, recants everything that he has said, and then life goes on, people continue to protest. So what this tells us is that there isn't a common binding political movement emerging, but it's just popular manifestation of people that are frustrated with what is going on. So there's been no specific proposals on what the president or the government needs to be doing in giving back this purchasing power. But I think people are actually fed up with the inaction on the part of the government to be responsive in the policies and choices that they make in such a manner that at this point in time, their lives are being affected very negatively.
So what has the February elections done to change anything in Togo?
What it has done, it has actually entrenched the consolidation of power by President Nasibe. I think more than anything else, what we have to say is that it's a miscarriage of democracy. It's a stealing of the people's will or a people's commitment to democratic processes such as elections, whereby although they will participate and make their choices known, but you actually steal that legitimacy, convert that legitimacy, pervert that legitimacy in order to actually consolidate power. That is what has happened in that country. So it calls on us to actually now start interrogating once more whether the rituals of elections, are they enough as an indicator of a country's commitment or a government's commitment to good governance and to the expression of the people's will. Because what happened is that after these elections, Nasibe has now got some measure of perverted legitimacy to actually say that, well, we did go to the ritual, it did produce results, and this is how we're reorganizing those results in order to guide the country forward or misguide it in this case.
Let's look at the past 20 years then, where Nasibe has been in power since 2005, having succeeded his father who died. What has been achieved in these past 20 years, would you say, in Togo?
The standard was very low, Asanda, I have to be quite honest. I think when you come from an outright dictatorial system with somebody who had been in power since 1967, who died in office, the standard is not going to be very high. Whilst a change in government presents an opportunity to chart a different progressive path that is responsive to the needs of the people, I think Togo did not do that. But what foreign Nasibe did after his father died is that he actually brought onto the caravan of democracy, whereby you say that we will do elections, we will participate in regional standards of democracy, human rights, and such like. That is where Togo has been at for the last 20 years. But when it comes to, if you look into all the metrics that we use to talk of development, to talk of progress, it has not really done much for the country. Let us remember that with Eyadema, this is Fore's father, having been in power since 1967, he actually came at a time when there was that problematic particular institution, the military, was squabbling with coups and counter-coups since independence. So he provided a semblance of supposed stability instead of the coup and counter-coupping by the military. So a big institution that has been behind the consolidated power of Fore Nasibe has been the military. And for many people, I mean, they would rather have a flawed democracy than a country that is governed by a military junta. So the only thing that many people would point out as having been positive, or at least not entirely negative about Togo, is the fact that the military somewhat had a less prominent role than the big man of Africa's politics, being the president in the form of Fore Nasibe.
What is the response for when it comes to these protests from opposition parties? Are they able to even be vocal as much as they should in the country?
They definitely are. I think that one thing that this particular protest has actually done is to galvanize opposition parties and to galvanize them to the point whereby traditional enmities have actually been put aside in order to actually be vocal. I think more than anything else, there is more engagement in the political process beyond opposition politics, which is a good sign for progress, in that opposition parties are now starting to channel and use their platforms to actually express issues that are not exclusively political, which is good for civil society, which is good for the type of future democracy of the country, when people who have got a political platform actually use that platform not only to ventilate narrow sectarian interests, but to actually use it as a broad-based platform to make visible the issues of other people who are having a problematic relationship with power. This is what I think characterizes, at least following from the last 3 days of protest.
Has the coalition of opposition parties achieved better strides since its formation, as far as you see it, instead of them having standing alone positions?
I think, firstly, the starting point would be to mobilize as much as they have. We have got different definitions and applications of the notion of coalition. I think more than anything else, in a country that has been brutalized by big man politics, brutalized by big man politics colluding with the military, the political culture becomes perverted, and any little progress is considered an achievement. I think at this point in time, consistently making visible and voluble voices that are opposing this constitutional perversion in that country is possibly a big step and a starting point for actually reorganizing governance in that particular country. They remember, Asanda, we're not talking here of a progressive government that will have an extended and transparent legislative policy reform agenda. So even opposition politics are actually limited by what it is that government is doing instead of what it is not doing.
Let's talk then in terms of the West Africa region and the other states, in terms of how they can intervene in the affairs of Togo, and if they should, what would they be needing to do?
Well, at this point in time, what we know of the economic community of West African states is that they've got a very extended and elaborate crisis management capability. I imagine that during this coming week, Togo will possibly find itself as an agenda item where the peace and security body of ECOWAS will now be sitting down to say, what is the regional impact of the developments in Togo? Does it present a threat? One of the things that we know about that particular body, ECOWAS, is that it does not necessarily share with the other regional bodies in Africa the notion that we have to wait for something to be a regional crisis. They actually have given themselves, and Togo is a member of ECOWAS, the power to actually intervene if the affairs of one of their member states is not actually conducive to a democratic progress, as it were. So I imagine that at this point in time, these developments are actually going to draw the attention of the economic community of West African states.
What are the chances that President Nasibe may step down, or at least step down from the position of the president of the Council of Ministers?
It's very hard to tell at this point in time. I mean, he has gone through a lot of trouble to work, if not bewitch, the Constitution. He has gone to a lot of trouble to reorganize the functioning of the government. All of these were intended for one thing, to consolidate his power. So not unless something really drastic happens, I think it's impossible. I don't foresee it at this point in time with all the cards that we're seeing on the table. Him voluntarily just leaving. There is that one institution, Asanda, the military. It is largely going to be the play of the military that will be an influential factor on his political calculus. Will the military feel the pressure from domestic, regional, and international pressure to say deal with the protesters differently? will the military, and we've seen this playbook in many different other countries, whereby the military, which was the mainstay of the big men of a particular country, decide that for their own preservation as an institution in society, they would rather be seen to be reformist rather than a consolidator of power. So these are all the things that all of us have got to be on the lookout for, as this particular situation in Togo has been partly under the radar for many of us.
So what type of change then are these protests set to achieve in Togo?
Well, I mean, the coalition body called Hands Off My Constitution is quite clear. Firstly, we want to restore the old constitution. All constitutional reform must be done with the participation of the people, not through a parliamentary system that is compromised. That's the first thing, hands off the constitution. Secondly, it is very much serious that we want a change in government. At this point in time, the reality of the matter is that they've been dealt a very hard hand by the last election in terms of the results that were produced. But the reality of the matter is that for them, the second thing is we want a change in government, or an opportunity to change those that are in government. And I think that this is very clear in terms of how they've come together from different opposition parties, tying in with civil society, tying in with other institutions in society. That basically is where we are at this point in time. I would imagine, Asanda, that over the couple of weeks, there will emerge more coherent, not only just messaging, but a more coherent vision for the country, alternative politics of the country. But at this point in time, it's just touch and go as protest would have it.
Let's leave it there for now. Kwezi, we appreciate your time again here on Channel Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Asanda.
That's Kwezi Mngibisa, who is political analyst and researcher, discussing the events of Togo, having seen protests starting last week, Thursday, and over the weekend. And one wonders then, in terms of the figures that come through, what the real ones are. As you know, we heard in that conversation that it's not so forthcoming, the country, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to accountability, and for us to even know how many people are injured or how many people are arrested. But those calls then coming from civil society hopefully will yield some kind of a change, and a change in direction, and also for the protests. I think when young people step into something, people take notice.
Look, it's going to happen more and more, actually, as the years go by. June the 30th, 1960, guess what happened?
What happened in this day in history?
The Democratic Republic of Congo gained its independence from Belgium. A significant moment, a significant time. Sadly, it's not all been honey and roses since, but Patrice Lumumba became the first prime minister, and we all know what happened there. He got assassinated eventually. But it was the start of a new path. So we'll have more today in history a little bit later on. Right now, though,
it's time for news headlines. 8:30 Central African time it is. Good morning, Onele.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. At least 7 people are reported to have been killed and many others wounded during an anti-government protest in the Togolese capital Lome over the weekend. The African National Congress in South Africa has vowed to reflect on the political implications of the Democratic Alliance's decision to withdraw from the national dialogue following the dismissal of their Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield. And Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's 12-day conflict with Iran has improved the chances of freeing hostages still being held in Gaza. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
It's time now for your sports. Here's Rachel Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Very good morning from the Sports Day. So today marks officially 5 days until the start of the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco. The tournament runs from the 5th until the 26th of July. South Africa are the defending champions, having won their maiden title back in 2022 in Morocco. Banyana goalkeeper Kaden Swart says they are ready to defend their title this time around.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that we're just a couple days away from, kickoff, but we're excited. I know, sometimes the environment and, the weather and how hot it is, I don't think we've realized how hot it is, even though 2022 we were here. But no, I think we're all excited, we're ready. Now it's just, dotting the I's and just trying to unite as players. And
meanwhile, Swart speaks about the pressure of being the defending champions.
I say pressure is a privilege, and I think when our backs are against the wall, that's when we really perform. And I will back this team 100% all the time. And yeah, there is a little bit of pressure being champions because, that title holds a lot of weight. But I know that once we start the tournament, that pressure is not going to get to us because we know what's it going to take and how, we've grown so much individually.
Further field now, Paris Saint-Germain coach Luis Enrique says defeating Lionel Messi as well as Inter Miami on Sunday was trickier than it seemed despite the French side's 4-0 Club World Cup last 16 triumph. Now, João Neves' early strike sent PSG ahead, and then they scored 3 more in a flurry before half-time to take an unassailable lead. Now, former PSG as well as Barcelona star Messi impressed in the second half as Miami battled well but could not find a way through. The Spanish coach said his PSG side, who won the Champions League, the Ligue 1 as well as the French Cup to claim their first ever treble, are in spectacular form and are hoping to triumph in the USA. Meanwhile, Harry Kane scored twice as Bayern Munich overcame a determined resistance from Flamengo to book their place in the FIFA Club World Cup quarterfinals with an entertaining 4-2 victory on Sunday. Vincent Kompany's side now will have to play European champions PSG and Atlanta on Saturday for a place in the last 4. Flamengo, backed by a huge and a passionate following at the Hard Rock Stadium, bow out of the tournament despite a performance of real determination. On to golf news now. 20-year-old Aldrich Potgieter, the youngest player on the PGA Tour, has become the youngest South African to win on the toughest golf tour in the world. So Potgieter, who lost in the playoff in the Mexican Open earlier on this year, his rookie year on tour needed 17 holes for his first win. He beat American Max Graceham with a birdie on the 5th playoff hole to win the Rocker Classic at the Detroit Golf Club in Michigan. Now the duo, as well as another American, that is Chris Kirk, completed the regulation 72 holes in 266, about 22 under par, before Kirk was eliminated after a bogey on the second playoff hole. Another South African in his rookie season, Tristan Lawrence, finished in a tie for 8th, 3 shots behind Potgieter. And finally, Lando Norris fought off a challenge from the McLaren teammate Oscar Piastri to win the Austrian Grand Prix on Sunday. Norris' third win of the year, leading home a McLaren 1-2, reduced his deficit in the championship to the Australian to 15 points heading into the British Grand Prix this weekend. The McLarens utterly dominated the race. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc took the final podium place in 17 seconds behind, with teammate Lewis Hamilton a further 9 seconds behind. Mercedes' George Russell took 5th, while Red Bull's Max Verstappen was taken out by another Mercedes driver, Kimi Antonelli, on the first lap and 61 points of the championship lead. Let's hear from Lando Norris following that win in Austria yesterday.
Yeah, it was an exciting fight with Oscar. It was tough, especially the first few laps, first 20 laps. He was pushing a lot, and I think he just had DRS, and then he could get the battery up, and I had to keep using my battery to try and get him out of DRS. So I was in a very, very difficult situation, but managed to always stay ahead, even though, I made a couple of mistakes here and there. And
All right, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. More sporting updates in the next hour with the On The Move team for Channel Africa Sport. I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Révérend Docteur Alain.
Je suis content, très heureux d'être de la partie ce soir et bonjour à tous nos auditeurs.
Je rappelle que pour les intimes, il vous appelle bien sûr BMB. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons courage sur Mix Vibration. Comment définissez-vous le terme courageux?
Ça vient du latin cor, qui veut tout simplement exprimer la bravoure, la force de l'âme ou encore la virilité, le héroïsme que quelqu'un peut avoir en face de difficultés, en face de problèmes, en face de défis.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's check in with the world of business as we get the latest from Chandugo Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, will lead a delegation to the 4th International Conference on the Financing for Development Summit that is taking place in Seville, Spain, starting today. They from the presidency says the event aims to address new and emerging issues in financing for development, including the need to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Sharon Bryce Peace reports.
President Ramaphosa has delegated Lamola as the head of delegation following what he referred to as recent political developments that require close monitoring and management in the country, a reference to current tensions in the government of national unity. South Africa's participation at the summit aligns with its G20 presidency objectives of solidarity, equality and sustainability in complementing and supporting the summit's goals of reshaping the global financial system in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. On the margins of the 4th Finance for Development Summit, South Africa will convene a side event under the theme Forging a Common Agenda to Achieve Debt Sustainability in Developing Countries. Shervin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
As Employee Wellness Week begins tomorrow, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of South Africa is gearing up to their employee wellness campaign to promote good health and well-being in the workplace. The foundation's Chief Executive Officer, Professor Pamela Naidu, explains how employees can achieve their wellness goals even through a full day of work.
Employee wellness is really around the total wellness of somebody in that is employed in a particular place, or even owners of various organizations and institutions. If you have a policy in place, and despite people perhaps being on private medical aids and so on, but at least twice a year, you should know the health check, if you like, of the total organization. So what is your health indicator? How are your employees doing?
News from North Africa. Egypt has begun shutting down some local wheat collection centers ahead of schedule, signaling that the harvest is nearing its end, with purchases falling short of the government's target. The shortfall comes as Egypt, often the world's largest wheat importer, seeks to secure affordable supplies for a vast subsidized bread program that feeds nearly 70 million people amid high inflation and ongoing economic strains. The government had aimed to procure between 4 and 5 million metric tons of wheat from a local harvest, it estimated at around 10 million tons. The season, which started in mid-April, officially runs through mid-August. U.S. President Donald Trump says that he has found a buyer for the TikTok short video app, which he described as a group of very wealthy people whose identities he will reveal in about 2 weeks. Trump made the remarks in an American TV news program during an interview. He says the deal he is developing will probably need China's approval to move forward, and he predicted Chinese President Xi Jinping would likely approve it. The U.S. president earlier this month had extended to the 17th of September a deadline for China-based ByteDance to divest the U.S. assets of TikTok despite a law that mandated a sale or shutdown without significant progress. Finally, Asia shares firmed as signs of progress in a trade standoff between the U.S. and Canada help risk sentiment, while the dollar dipped on concerns U.S. jobs data will show enough weakness to justify larger rate cuts. Canada says it had rescinded its digital services tax in a bid to advance trade negotiations, bowing to pressure from President Donald Trump. Tabiso Lehuku has more.
The talks are aimed at getting the deal done by the 21st of July, extending Trump's original 9th of July deadline for his reciprocal tariffs. Officials have suggested most deals could now be done by the 1st of September Labor Day holiday. Investors were also keeping a wary eye on the progress of a huge U.S. tax cutting and spending bill slowly making its way through the Senate, with the signs it may not make it by Trump's preferred 4th of July deadline. The Congressional Budget Office estimated the bill would add $3.3 trillion to the nation's debt, testing foreign appetite for U.S. treasuries.
Financial indicators at this hour: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 541, Botswana 13 pula 29, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 534, Zambia 23 kwacha 65. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 48, Russia 78 rubles 43, India 85 rupee 41, China 7 yuan 16, South Africa $1 is at 17 rand 80 cents. $1 is 72 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,288, platinum at $1,363 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $67.63 a barrel. That's all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Over 35 organizations are expected to converge at the Union Buildings in Pretoria over illegal immigrants in South Africa. They say South Africa is facing a myriad of challenges and that foreign nationals are worsening the situation. Yes, Khutato, just take us through the main aims of the march, what you're hoping to get from them.
So we are basically saying to the President of the Republic of South Africa, illegal immigration is a pandemic. Implement the laws. It's not that we don't have these laws. How many people are being human trafficked? How many people are being hijacked? Our schools are full. Our hospitals are full. And it's almost as if we're carrying the burdens of the entire Africa at the expense of South Africans. And we are basically saying enough is enough. We want the President of the Republic of South Africa to meet us at the Union Building. We've submitted letters to say that we are coming on this day. We want to meet with him there to give him this mandate because clearly he has failed citizens. He's failed South Africans by failing to implement the law. That's the most important thing. We are going to give you a mandate. We, the people, shall govern.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu on Channel Africa every weekday from 12 to 2 p.m. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, let's take a look at this story now that takes us to South Africa. The Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance, SAPA, has urged the media to give greater attention to the impact of alcohol consumption on individuals and communities. This call was made during a media dialogue hosted by the organization, which focused on the dangers of alcohol abuse and the limited coverage that it receives in South Africa. SAPA says that alcohol misuse should be reported with the same urgency and depth as other pressing social issues such as gender-based violence. The dialogue also underscored the need for stricter policies to curb the widespread availability of alcohol in communities. Picking up this story for us is Chofoma, SABC's Mbali Chofoma.
The Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance Secretary General Adila Maker-Dedrick says vulnerable populations like the youth or those in low-income communities may be overly targeted by alcohol advertisers, worsening existing health disparities. She says stricter regulations on the alcohol industry limiting the distribution of alcohol needs to be put in place.
So we've got advertising as a problem, and particularly in South Africa and on the continent, we need to acknowledge that people in the northern countries have become more alcohol literate, and there are more regulations in the countries in the north. So the alcohol industry is coming to the African continent, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, where we've got limited legislation and we've got a pool of young people to be captured.
Dedrick says the idea that alcohol consumption is normal is maintained by the ease with which it is marketed in local communities.
I think that the key issue that we need to address in South Africa is that we have alcohol that is far too available for young people in communities where they live. And I know I often quote the Khayelitsha example, but it's probably the most stark for me, is that we have licensed outlets, but that we have sometimes 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 10 times the amount of licensed outlets in communities. And what that does, it normalizes alcohol.
Media personality and activist Penny Lebiane says insufficient media coverage may leave people uninformed about the dangers of alcohol abuse.
I think there's a role that we have to play as media because we understand the 360 of communities. And when I say community, I mean inclusively. We understand how the advertising industry works. We understand how marketing works. We understand what promotion is. But we also understand the content that is created to entice ordinary people who are not exposed to the mechanics that those industries use, whether it's to advertise alcohol, a car, water, clothes. It's the same mechanics. But the reality of it is that where there is manipulation and a playbook on the mind, especially of young people, we are not doing the work of informing young people the dangers of exposure to alcohol by how we behave as adults and how we glamorize and how we simplify it as a harmless concept.
To raise awareness of the risk associated with alcohol consumption, the Rethink Your Drink campaign advocates for the revival of the 2016 Draft Liquor Amendment Bill, which proposes new restrictions on alcohol advertising, availability and liability of retailers and manufacturers. Campaign manager Kafisha Answer says South Africa should follow in the footsteps of nations like Canada, where warning signs about the risk and dangers of alcohol are stated to help people make more educated decisions.
Under South African regulation, the alcohol industry is required by law to have one of the 7 required labels on alcoholic beverages in a particular size font, on a particular background, in a particular color, in order to alert users to the risks of their consumption. So the negative side effect is that now we have an industry that hides behind drink responsibly, not for sale under the age of 18, but is not rotating to more stern, more direct labels such as drinking during pregnancy could harm your fetus, drinking alcohol causes cancer. All of those kinds of labels that are very specific are not being rotated.
SAPA says continuous engagement with policy officials, the media and the community can bridge the gap in starting the process of eliminating the usage of alcohol. I am Bali Kyomva in Cape Town.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
The Cultural and Creative Industries Guild of Africa, or CCIGA, and the National Film and Video Foundation of South Africa, the NFVF, held a 2-day workshop this weekend to empower creatives in the film industry in Johannesburg, South Africa. CCIGA says despite the industry contributing about 60 billion to the gross domestic product of South Africa, the industry remains unregulated, leaving creatives with the challenge of securing permanent jobs. Sisi Sekhalo has more on this story.
The 2-day event featured companies, facilitators, film festival organizers and training institutions. The board member SIGA, Ivan Teso, says the gathering focused on filmmakers that want to grow their businesses and also those that want to venture into filmmaking or multimedia sector in general.
So the aim here is to really scout for filmmakers that don't have businesses, but let them get those businesses to be compliant, to register, and thereafter we bring funders on board and we make them to have a direct engagement with them, not us speaking on their behalf. Because at times we really need to come to a point where we need artists to speak for themselves. And that's what we are doing. And then the third thing is to look at opportunities from the corporate sector. So most of the time when artists are looking for money, it's all about running to the Department of Arts and Culture or anything that has to do with arts and culture. But they don't realize that private companies, they have money and they are actually looking for the creatives to partner with them. That's the conversation that we are having during this event as well. And then lastly is to really have a very serious conversation between the artists and the government. Government, I think the reason why they decide not to give us enough money is because we don't really put our case straight to them as to how do we need this money and why do we want it to be increased.
She elaborates on what the 2 days covered.
The first day we're focusing on the master classes. It's all about skills. It's all about how as artists can work together. It's all about how can we improve our projects and even our pitching to the corporate sector. And then the second day we're focusing on panel discussions where all the stakeholders, they come in one room and they have that talk.
Kuthula Ngobo is a film and television graduate. He describes himself as a filmmaker that deals more with editing. He also deals with cinematography and sound. He shared what he took from the 2 days of the workshop.
I came here to learn what I did not know or to add anything that I did not know in my skills. So since I got here, I got an opportunity to interact with different people, getting to know who is who, what are they dealing with, asking them those questions and those. With the interviews that were held inside here, the building, I also got to learn more from each and every that was spoken by each and every speaker there inside. So, and another thing, I didn't only come here as a participant. I also came here because SIGA gave me an opportunity, gave me work to come and work with them in partnership so that I can also be the member of the crew, the team that is working behind the scenes.
Another creative is Prudence Ngube. Ngube wears many hats in the industry, from being a media and public relations specialist, content producer, show host, and many more. She has learned to diversify and monetize from the industry. She shares what she benefited from the workshops.
I got invited yesterday as a guest, and basically we did practical and implementable steps on filmmaking. We actually got to create a film, and I absolutely loved it because it took me through the process, the practical processes as well. And today is actually an amazing day. And Jongo Bangila, there's a guy from Liberty and Standard Bank, and they're taking us through the financial processes of being a filmmaker or a creative in the creative industry. And they're talking about your backup plans, right? Giving us examples of celebrities that have made it and had financial glitches because of the lack of information thereof. You understand, like Uguti, obviously, you creative, you get paid per gig or projects wise, and you need a way to save up, right? And obviously, sometimes and you can't save as much as you can, but now we're being enlightened on how you can save, how you can maneuver to the financial probabilities. And I think, like I said, diversifying, having multiple streams of income in the same industry.
Corporate companies also made presentations at the workshops on how creatives can package their funding proposals. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
All right, some more today in histories. Today, Malawi declared independence from Britain, although formally celebrated on the 6th of July. Malawi, then Nyasaland at the time, was granted full internal self-government on the 30th of June 1964, and Hastings, controversial Kamuzu Banda, would become the first Prime Minister and late President. And on the same day, 30 June 1971, Idi Amin consolidated his grip on power, proclaiming himself the president for life, Benjamin Mushatama.
Yeah, we know how that went.
Yes, exactly. All these stories. Hastings Banda.
Yeah.
Idi Amin.
What an interesting day in history.
It is. How are you?
I'm good. Nice weekend.
Yeah, it was. Actually, I'm busy recovering. I think this cough or flu, whatever it is going around.
Oh, yeah. It's gotten you. Stay away from me, Peter.
Sure.
Stay away. I love your tie, by the way. Peter's wearing this bright-colored, multicolored collage of a tie.
See it on social media.
It's very cool.
So what's on the move after 9 o'clock?
Well, we've got some interesting vibes on our debate feature where we debate one topic. So we'll have a pro and a con person. We're going to be debating, why do men not like going to get checkups? Or men, why don't we just not like going to the hospital? What are we running away from? And most of us are dying from preventable diseases.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, eh? And do you know that Lance Armstrong had one of his testes literally growing to the size of a freaking golf ball? And he still didn't go to the doctor. I don't know what he thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
And eventually they said, mate, this is a year later. You've got testicular cancer. A whole year.
Hectic.
But you know what? We are all guilty of it as men.
We are all guilty of it. Sometimes we take too long, or you have to have something that's really coming out. So maybe maybe something that's...
Let's get a female perspective.
I think when you have a partner, then we're the ones who force you guys.
Yes,
if you're
that's
single,
true.
Then I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
But women, do they go generally?
Yes, we do, very much.
All the time.
Wow.
Women go all the time for everything. When they feel something, they really get on it. Yeah, when you feel something, you're
bordering on.
Let me self-medicate first, and then I'll, sort it out. Or maybe it's just because we've grown like that. It wasn't a big deal. Where women always used to be taken to the hospital. I know my little sister, if there was a small thing, she was taken. With me, man, you'll be fine, man.
Yeah, and it works the same with therapy as well. Men don't, you guys don't like therapy.
No.
It's like you feel like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, there's a mental handicap.
And yet we should be doing therapy much more than women, because more men commit suicide than women.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's what's coming up, guys. It's going to be an interesting debate.
So you and I, my friend, we've got to step up.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you go see your urologist once a year?
Urologist, even already you are confusing me.
My God.
Already in jail, I'm blind, I'm in the dark.
That's your annual checkup to see that your prostate is fine. No, you've got to go. I go every year on my birthday.
Yeah. Apparently now there's a blood test. We did a show on that now you don't have to have stuff stuck up somewhere. So now you can just get
they do both. That shows you haven't been forever. And you're fast approaching 40, eh?
Yeah, just a few days from now.
Mate, I'm going to make the appointment for you.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Cool
beans.
Do you prefer a male or female urologist? If there's things that are going to be stuck into you.
Female, come on.
No, it's just, you know why though? Because they've got smaller hands.
Okay.
That's the only reason for me.
Are you sure, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't.
Hey, Konjo, we're still in a sensitive time. There are children listening and mothers and fathers.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Cheers. Bye.
We'll see you tomorrow from me, Asanda Beda, and Peter Ndoro.
Have a good one. The news is next with Onel and Cincy. It's 9 o'clock.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at your top stories, anti-government protests in the Togolese capital and the latest on Israel and Iran. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. At least 7 people are reported to have been killed and many others wounded during an anti-government protest in the Togolese capital Lome this week. And demonstrators in Togo continue to demand the resignation of President Farouk Gnassingbe, whose family has ruled the West African nation since 1967. The unrest, which began on Thursday, was sparked by Gnassingbe's recent appointment to the powerful role of President of the Council of Ministers, which has no fixed term limit. Dozens of protesters have been arrested.
So what Nasibe has done is that he has actually changed the political system of Togo from being a presidential system to being a parliamentary system. But there is a catch here. It's not magnanimity for the concern of popular participation of the people, but he actually has created now an institutional vacuum whereby there will be a council of ministers, which he will be president, and here's the catch. That presidency of the Council of Ministers has no term limits, which means that although he has been in power since 2005, there is no telling when he will actually ever step out or anybody else to actually challenge him.
The African National Congress in South Africa has vowed to reflect on the political implications of the Democratic Alliance's decision to withdraw from the national dialogue following the dismissal of its Deputy Minister, Andrew Whitfield. The DA has also called on civil society organizations to reconsider their support for the dialogue. Last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa fired Whitfield for undertaking a U.S. trip without authorization. But DA leader John Steenhuisen says Ramaphosa's action was unfair as he fails to act against ANC ministers like Nobuhle Nkabane and Thembi Simelane. Democratic Alliance Federal Chair Helen Zille explains.
Well, we can only work on the handbook. And the handbook says ministers and deputy ministers should appeal to the president if they are going on official business abroad. Now, Whitfield was not going on official business abroad. This was a private trip paid for by the DA, and we wanted to try and dissuade them from withdrawing South Africa from AGOA. And he wrote 10 days before he left. And his office followed up every day telephonically for a reply. So to be fired for the president's failure to reply to a letter is a bit much.
South Africa's African National Congress Party Secretary General Fikile Mbalula has meanwhile disputed accusations that the ANC is using the national dialogue to try and retain power. The Coalition Democratic Alliance Party has withdrawn from the dialogue in protest at the treatment it says it has received from President Ramaphosa. The DA says it is also considering a motion of no confidence against Ramaphosa. Balula says the ANC will not tolerate the DA's threats.
There's no such a thing. National dialogue was proposed by civil society, which we supported. There's no such a thing as using national dialogue to capture the imagination of the people. It is a South African thing. It is led by government working with all other civil society organizations. Hence, we support. There's no ANC that is leading the national dialogue. It's a false pronunciation that has been made by the DA, of which the reality, this dialogue is about the interest of the people of South Africa.
The anti-migrant group Operation Dudula has accused the South African Human Rights Commission of sidelining citizens' needs over illegal foreigners. Members of the Operation Dudula conducted raids on hijacked buildings in Rosettenville, Johannesburg on Saturday. They confronted police over what they claim is inadequate action against illegal occupations. The Human Rights Commission reported the group to the National Police Commissioner, Fani Masemula, and the Hawks ahead of the raids. Operation Dudula President Zandile Dabula has questioned the role of the commission.
These human rights commissions, they need to come clean and come out and tell us who are they? Who are they actually supporting and who are they advocating for? Because to us it looks as if they are advocating for foreign nationals. Now I'm saying this because in many incidents we had kids that died of poisonous food. We did not see them. We have kids that are being raped by foreign nationals, but they are nowhere to be seen. But immediately when you touch the issues of foreign nationals, and then they come out, they even have the audacity to take us to court, nobody will stop us because we cannot just sit back and watch our country going down the drain.
Lastly, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's 12-day conflict with Iran has improved the chances of freeing hostages still being held in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister was speaking to members of the Domestic Intelligence Agency. Netanyahu is due to testify this week in a high-profile criminal case. He is facing charges of political corruption, including bribery and fraud. The Prime Minister's attempts to again delay the High Court's hearing on account of his busy schedule and the special state of emergency over the Iran war were rejected at the end of last week. The BBC's Wyatt Davis reports.
The Israeli military has warned it will escalate operations with extreme force to destroy Hamas's remaining capabilities. But in what could be interpreted as an indication of some flexibility, Benjamin Netanyahu today said that after victory over Iran, many opportunities had opened up, first of all to rescue the hostages and defeat Hamas. That emphasis on hostages first was welcomed by their families as a sign that perhaps the Prime Minister might be prepared to strike a deal to end the war.
Recapping on your